Okay, everyone, it's 6 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Bizzle, Chairman of the North Carolina Marine Fisheries Commission, and would like to welcome you to our public comment session where you have a unique opportunity to, on the record, give comment in regards to the Marine Fisheries Commission management of the state's public trust, estuarine, and marine resources. I ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. You will be reminded when you have approximately 30 seconds left. Please state if you represent any group. If you address the commission tonight, you will not be allowed to do so tomorrow morning. Remember, this is a time to share a concern or gather information, not to be confrontational. Okay, first up this evening is Donald Willis, followed by Stuart Crichton.
I'm representing my own company, Custom Marine Fabrication, which I've been doing since the 80s. I'm here to talk about striped mullet tonight, probably from a little different view. We really need to step it up and to make sure these fish are taken care of. This is a very important forage fish for all of our game fish. Our indoor life cycle, speckled trout, redfish, bluefish, striper, tarpon, king mackerel in the state waters in the ocean, they all feed on these fish. And we need these fish in a big way. One of the big ways is because a lot of our juvenile finfish that these fish fed on in years past are gone through mismanagement. Juvenile spots, croakers, gray trout, they're gone through mismanagement of what we're here tonight talking about. We need to step it up and to have a great management plan to keep these fish here for all of our game fish. Look in Virginia, in the bay up there. You can see what Omega did by taking all the menhaden out. It's destroyed the striper, and we can do the same thing here if we don't protect our mullet. I'm here to tell you, it's very important to all of us, because without these predator fish, none of us are making money. Inaction is an action, but it's not the right action at any time. We need to step it up, guys. We need to come up with a plan, not only for the mullet, but for everything that feeds on the mullet. Let's not make this the next southern flounder. Let's make this happen and do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Stuart Crichton, followed by Sam Romano.
Evening, everybody. Commissioners, even though the agenda for this session is fairly light, there are numerous important issues, some emerging very recently, that require your full attention. I will try to describe them briefly, but you need to get ahead of each one of these right now. Of greatest concern is the condition of the striped bass population in the ASMA and RRMA. From the 2021 update that you will hear this week, the spawning stock biomass is down to roughly 10% of its target level. In addition, the juvenile abundance indices for 2021 and 2022 are near zero, which means we have had 2 more years of failed spawns, in spite of good flow levels. And don't forget, we're managing these fish from a year behind. You're working on a 2021 update right now, and it's 2023. I would also ask, what do the preliminary numbers for the spawning stock biomass indicate for 2022? The division is going to recommend a further reduction in the TAL to just over 8,000 pounds. Folks, we can't do that. Regrettably, and I do mean regrettably, it is time to close this fishery and aggressively attack the factors that are contributing to the demise of our last native spawning population of striped bass. If flow is the problem, reverse the rule change that happened several years ago and make sure the flows are correct during spawning season. If blue cats are the problem, then they should be aggressively removed, but with trot lines and hoop nets, not gill nets. I watched frequent spawning aggregates up the Roanoke this year, and I noticed that the spawning fish were all small. I continue to contend that we have so drastically removed the large, mature females that effective spawning will be impossible. To that end, we have to allow the fishery the time it needs to grow these large fish. Net-free areas similar to those established on the Neuse and Tar-Pamlico rivers will be an effective tool in allowing that to happen. Commissioners,
30 seconds.
you cannot delay any longer. You must act now if you want to save these important fish. I had other issues, guys, with speckled trout, striped mullet, and some concerning proposed studies. If it's okay, Commissioners, I will email that to you so that you can review them during the course of this meeting.
That'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sam Romano, followed by Joe Romano.
My name is Sam Romano, and I'm a commercial fisherman and co-owner of Seaview Crab Company in Wilmington, North Carolina. It seems like with every new fisheries management plan, we hear the term overfished and overfishing being repeated, and it makes the general public feel we may catch our last fish in the ocean. Never has this been more deceiving than with striped mullet. Our expert fishermen know that natural cycles dictate stock levels rather than fishing pressure. Stock assessments focus solely on fishing pressure as the ultimate indicator of whether a stock is viable or not. Stock assessments cannot accurately incorporate predation or environmental factors, so they are left out. Mullet grow to maturity in a year, mixed genetically with mullet from other states, spawn miles offshore with 4 million larvae per spawn. Mullet populations are built robust to support our ecosystems, and fishing regulations will have very little measurable effects on these stocks. Our experienced mullet fishermen in our state are perplexed because as this stock assessment was coming out, they were having one of the best years they can remember. When you have this sort of disagreement between stakeholders and fisheries managers, it's time to pause and reflect. It's time to lean on your most experienced commercial mullet fishermen and seek to understand rather than regulate. The pursuit of science involves asking questions, self-scrutiny, and out-of-the-box thinking. We're continuing our breakneck pace of drafting rules and politically cutting up the pie and ignoring stakeholders. This amendment seeks to close mullet fishing during the end of the year. This means the southern area will bear the regulatory burden for the rest of the state. Anyone in favor of this rule should have the guts to go to the fishermen in the southern area and explain to them why their livelihoods are being targeted for this closure. This arbitrary judgment is unfair and follows a pile of regulations that is cutting the seafood industry apart more every year. So many rules are passed that our state doesn't even have enough resources to go back and see if we've accomplished anything with these rules. My main concern as a stakeholder and citizen is that we are losing our seafood security with every new rule drafted. We should be encouraging eating healthy local seafood and encouraging young people to become fishing stewards of the environment. Instead, we are making seafood jobs more risky and local seafood more expensive and less available. You have the opportunity to say no to these regulations because you don't have enough information. This is not a sky is falling event.
30 seconds.
This is something that you can do about now and ask the state to give you more information so that you can do your job as fisheries managers. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Joe Romano, followed by Taylor Barefoot.
My name is Joe Romano. I'm a commercial fisherman and one of the owners of Seaview Crab Company in Wilmington. I've been a part of the NC Seafood as a commercial fisherman, a fishmonger, fisheries advisor, and a local seafood advocate for over 15 years. In those 15 years, I have grown hardened and nihilistic towards the politics and unchecked bureaucratic power that determines fisheries management in our state. But today I want to speak to the larger issues of domestic food security and the gentrification of our seafood. With more and more frequency, the DMF has a new emergency that needs a new set of rules to combat that emergency. In most cases, this new perceived scarcity has scientific data gaps, rarely takes into consideration how predation ecosystem cycles, weather events, and warming waters affect the annual abundance of most high fecundity species, such as mullets, spots, croakers, flounder, and speckled trout. In the end, the DMF offers more rules and the MFC determines if those rules pass. What rarely happens is that those rules lead back to more harvest or more commercial participation in the fishery. These rules discourage young commercial fishermen from investing in gear, boats, and the time it takes to learn a fishery. This means less and significantly more expensive NC seafood, which is slowly gentrifying our public trust resource. Does this affect the wealthy sport fisherman who has the time, money, and boat to fish? No. It affects all those families with limited fixed budgets that don't have access to seafood. This becomes particularly troublesome when one considers how much money is spent by sport fishing and conservation groups to lobby for more draconian regulation and less public access to seafood. The silent majority of working-class seafood consumers are rarely considered in these fisheries meetings and are in the dark about the reality of the ugly fishery politics. The gentrification of seafood is also leading to less domestic food security. One would think that after 2 years of severe supply chain shortages, labor issues with large meat processing plants, and increasingly poor quality of manufactured food, that our state would be doing all it could to encourage the NC seafood industry to produce more seafood. Instead, from behind computer screens, working from home, we continue to make it harder for fishers to bring seafood to the dock. I found it incredibly ironic and absurd that our fishmongers and fishermen were working to fill food gaps in the supply chain throughout the pandemic, while bureaucrats and unelected officials were making it more difficult to do so from behind computer screens and Zoom meetings. Scientific bureaucracies tend to consolidate power and become echo chambers over time. If all the DMF is there to do is chop up the pile of perceived scarcity by creating new rules that gentrify access to seafood and create more stakeholder conflict, then we are failing as a state. We must find better ways to minimize conflict and optimize seafood yield by supporting the communities and fishermen that feed us and provide unpaid scientific data collection to the state. Our fragmented but strong coastal fishing communities have fed us for over 150 years, and we should get behind them now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Taylor Barefoot, followed by Rocky Carter.
My name is Taylor Barefoot. I'm from Wilmington, North Carolina, full-time fisherman. First gentleman to come up here and spoke, he said he's really concerned about the endangerment of striped mullet. The address needs to be really, if he's so concerned about it, why don't they get rid of the cast nets and do something about the cast nets? Cast net is the #1 enemy of the mullets. The Marine Fisheries needs to look at the size of the mullets and needs to adopt a plan. If the gill net fishermen can only use an 1.25 inch size mesh, and that's the smallest we can use, why don't the cast nets go to that? If you don't have juveniles, they can't grow to be big ones. And they always want to preach about the fishermen and all. The fish that we catch have at least 2 to 3 times spawn. I'm not a professional in mullets, but I do know little fish have to turn into big fish to spawn. And like I say, I'm from the South. I pay the same dues as the man from the North. I deserve just as much time to fish as they do. And I think it's completely wrong what the Marine Fisheries has done and what it's trying to do. And I'm 30 years old. Like I told you at that first meeting, I base my life off of what I'm doing now. And how does a man expect to grow with a family? I got a wife, a kid, another one on the way. How am I supposed to grow when Marine Fisheries just act like at a flip of a pen, they can take my fisheries away from me? I think it's completely wrong. And the people here tonight need to think about their decisions. And you're the ones who's going to have to think about that at night when you cut out fishermen. It's not only us you're affecting, it's affecting our families and other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Rocky Carter, followed by Tim Hergenrader.
I'm Rocky Carter. I'm with the CCA. We've always heard how time flies. 25 years ago, back when Bill Clinton was president, I could keep 10 flounder a day, 14.5 inches each. I could keep them 365 days a year. The trout limits, both the speckled trout and the gray trout limit, was 10 to 12 inches a day. The red drum limit was 5 over 18 inches. In the mid-1990s, there became a growing concern about the future of our fisheries. Our legislators stepped up and passed a bill that was designed to protect our fisheries for future generations. Over 25 years ago, in 1997, the Fishery Reform Act was passed, giving North Carolina hope our fisheries would be managed for sustainability, as outlined in the Fishery Reform Act. Over the past 25 years, our once abundant fisheries have continued to decline. Why was that allowed? Ignoring the facts has never changed the facts. One of the most accepted means of evaluating fisheries is trending. Is a particular species trending up or is it trending down? Looking over the past 25 years, we would all agree many species are trending downward. With that in mind, we looked to MFC to make tough decisions to protect our fisheries, not simply saying status quo. Let's pretend we're all on a time machine and it's 25 years from now in 2048, and we're doing stock assessments. What will those stock assessments tell us 25 years from now? Will we have abundant, robust trout, drum, speckled trout, gray trout, spot, weak fish? Will these be abundant in 25 years? If not, then we need to make a decision today to protect these fish for all of our future generations and not ask the question, how can we feed everybody in North Carolina fresh seafood? But instead ask a question, can we see that our grandchildren eat fresh seafood? We have got to take care of these fisheries.
Thank you. Tim Hergenrader, followed by John McQuaid.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I want to speak a little bit about the striped mullet. I don't know a lot about striped mullet. I think I know one thing that's very important about striped mullet, and that is we're taking the females. We're taking the females out of the population before they have a chance to spawn. They're on their way to the ocean to spawn, and we're taking them out of the fishery. What could go wrong with this picture? When you take the females out of the population when they're trying to spawn, you're asking for trouble, and it's coming home to roost. The striped mullet is very important for our fishery. It's a prey species for everything out there practically. Without them, we got more trouble. I want to say a couple of things about a couple of studies that I think that the DMF and the MFC or whoever is supposed to be doing it have been remiss in not doing. One of them is the trawling in the sounds. We've spent a lot of money on BRDs trying to stem the tide to no avail. And meanwhile, we haven't studied the bottom. We don't really know what's happening out there. Some people say, oh, you got to plow the bottom to make it right. Other people are saying you can't do it. All I know is it destroys oyster rocks and seagrasses. I know that for a fact. But nobody's taken the time to develop a comprehensive study. The other one that really scalds me is we've had the moratorium in the Tar, Pamlico, and the Neuse Rivers now for 4 years, is it? I think it's 4 years, and thankfully you're past that. But I have seen no studies conducted about the impact of those closures. Nothing. What are we waiting for? There's been nothing done. We haven't studied. We've hollered and screamed at each other. Commissioners have debated this up one side and down the other. But nobody has taken the time to sit down and conduct a comprehensive study to what's happening in those three river systems since the moratorium was declared. Are we afraid to find out? It's about time somebody does something, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. John McQuaid, followed by Jim Thompson.
My name is John McQuaid. I live in the Raleigh area, but I've been fishing Morehead City, Beaufort, Atlantic Beach area since 1998. I've experienced firsthand the decline in our fisheries, our stocks, and our fishing opportunities. I used to catch I used to find abundant gray trout, red drum, striped bass, and croaker. Today, we've witnessed declines of most of these, and with every species that diminishes, it increases the pressure on the species that are left. Today, we inshore fishermen are left primarily with red drum, speckled trout, and Spanish mackerel. I think we need to address the destructive fishing practices that affect all these species, and we need to protect the forage species. So I'd like to come out in favor of the following things. Err on the side of conservation, not on maximum sustainable yield, but in conserving fish for the future. I'm willing to have restrictions on sizes, limits, and gear for speckled trout. I favor game fish status for speckled trout. I'm strongly opposed to relaxing restrictions on trawling above the ferry lines. And with striped bass, I think it's time to close the harvest. I'd like to follow the common sense practices that other southern states have implemented to restore their fisheries, banning inshore gill netting and stopping inshore trawling. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jim Thompson, followed by Brent Fulcher.
Mr. Chairman, I submitted an email to Dan Zapp and Jeff Dobbs yesterday. I don't know if they forwarded that to you or not, but I have copies. Would it be appropriate for me to approach and?
Let Laura get those from you. She'll distribute those.
First of all, I want to tell you that I have the greatest respect for the Division of Marine Fisheries. I have a relative who works there. My mother worked there for 30 years, back in the Jim Brown era and the Press-Paid era, and a number of others. I don't know if that name rings a bell with anyone, but she was a 30-year employee of that division. Now, I'm here to speak on behalf of many, many recreational fishermen who I've reached out to, various clubs, various other people who spend a lot of time at Cape Lookout recreationally fishing. My particular point I want to make is the data related to mullet and the recreational aspect of it is not based, it appears to me, on science. Now, as a lawyer practicing in Carteret County almost 50 years, I'm mindful, and sometimes painfully mindful, of the fact that rules and regulations can't be arbitrary or capricious. They have to be based on science. And so I've extracted some material from the website that was posted online, and I cut and pasted some of the provisions that are in that. And I'd like to extract those and read those to you. In one particular place, it says the heading of the paragraph was Decision to Select Preferred Management Strategy. Following the presentation by staff, the Commission engaged with DMF staff in a lengthy discussion, after which a number of motions were made, discussed, and voted on. Below are highlights of that discussion. First question, what is the estimated recreational harvest reduction? Answer, we cannot calculate an estimate for recreational harvest because the data available for the recreational harvest is not captured with enough precision to accurately calculate daily landings, and the recreational mullet harvest, both white and striped, is for bait.
30 seconds.
The next question is, why is recreational harvest being closed? Answer, to be equitable across all fisheries and to reduce management complexity to improve enforceability. So we're talking about 3 to 5 inch finger mullet. I want those finger mullet to be exempt from this restriction because there's no data to support that they should be restricted. Did someone say 30 seconds?
Well,
I'm sorry.
yeah, we said 30 seconds ago, so I had to call
Have I got
Time.
another few seconds?
No, sir.
Well, let me say this. The email speaks
Yes,
for
sir.
myself, and I present that on behalf of
Thank
me
you,
and
sir.
many, many recreational
Thank you, sir.
fishermen.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for your time.
Okay, Brent Fulcher.
everybody. Thank you opportunity for to speak there, Mr. Bizzle, Chairman. I've been working all day. I'm tired. I'm smelly. I've been in fish all day. I'm tired. My blood pressure went up as soon as I walked in the room. But my comments are at the FinFish meeting, the last one we had about this. First thing I'll say is I don't think that you should use a measure such as a supplement in a situation like this when you had last year's harvest was the 5th largest in the history of North Carolina. You know, supplements made for an emergency management where your fishery's collapsing. This is way out of bounds in my opinion. You're within 5% of the largest year ever harvested with at that time probably 5 times the fishermen participate in the fishery that you had this past year. I think there's a lot of things that you can get out of the staff if you ask them for it. There's a lot of fish sampled at my facility, large fish, early in the season, a big percentage of male fish that we don't traditionally see. So things have kind of changed, I think, indifferent than what your stock assessment probably is showing. I understand you have to use what you have to go with, but at the same time, I think you can probably add in some things. And I think that the supplement is the wrong action to take. I think you should go right on into your amendment, which is already on the schedule to move forward. Mr. Thompson was my attorney in my divorce, and I was kind of laughing, you know, 4 or 5 inch fish, he wants them exempted. On the same side, on the other side, you know, you don't typically catch juvenile fish because you try and protect them. So everybody always wants something a little different. You know, I heard that, and I haven't seen this, I think it's in your briefing book, but I heard that the division came out with a $3,000 to $1,000 reduction in fishermen if we go with the supplement and take a 1 week or 2 week reduction in their season. That can't be true. It might be true for one fisherman, but maybe not the next. I had fishermen I paid over $10,000 or $15,000 in that 2 week period just this past year. So it's not reflective of reality. I think that there's a lot of data y'all can get. I mean, it's just like I'm sitting here with the MREP program for your discards, recreational discards on some southern flounder. It says that 241,000 fish were released in the year 22 with an average weight of 50,000 pounds. That's 0.21. That's less than a quarter pound of fish.
30
that fish
seconds.
is about this big. It's not really reality. Just like some of this stuff coming out the division is not reality, the loss of income for these fishermen. And to say least, I will say the Romano brothers are completely correct. Every southern fisherman is very frustrated because they took the brunt of the fishery on the croakers, on the spot closure. So if you're going to do something, do it equitably. Figure out a way to at least make it equitable. Those guys are taking the brunt of all the fishery reductions. It's not fair for a fisherman south of Beaufort Inlet to catch the brunt of the fishery
Time.
restriction. Thank you for your and hard work.
Thank you. Has everybody had a chance to address the commission tonight that care to? If so, we'll close the public comment session for tonight and see y'all in the morning at 9 o'clock right here.